So Texet do a little Linux laptop. It's got an amazing set of specs on it. If we turn it over and look at the back, it has a whole 400 MHz processor, 2 GB of storage, 128 megs of RAM, a 7-inch screen, which is apparently 800 by 480, and it's got wireless connectivity as well. And in addition, unlike most of the little miniature laptops that you've got these days, this one runs Linux rather than Windows CE. You get the power adapter, which is nothing too exciting. Standard PSP style power supply. You get a diddy little manual. So this is the machine by standard, or as standard. So fairly small. You've got USB ports on the side and an Ethernet socket, so you can plug it into a wired network. You've got absolutely nothing on the bottom other than the cover for the battery. On the other side you've got nothing except possibly a security lock hole on the side. I've no idea how reliable that would be because it's made out of plastic, and you've got the power supply adapter, or the socket, to go there. And of course on the other side, something which I forgot to mention is the fact that you've got an SD card slot. And on the front you've got microphone and headphone sockets. So if you actually open it up, which is slightly tricky and it looks one-handed, then you've got the screen itself and the keyboard, once Mr. Camera gets around to focusing on it. And it's all nice and fairly small, and then you've got a little trackpad and the 2 mouse buttons on either side. Here it is next to my somewhat bigger standard laptop. So it really is quite small. So if you actually boot it up and pressing the little silver button down yonder, which is the only non-keyboard control, then what you get is a little Texet branded loading screen. Possibly slightly more than 20-30 seconds. But anyways, as you can see, it's all very much designed for non-technical users. There's a couple of oddities on it. By default, Wi-Fi is turned off, so if you go to the Wi-Fi network, then it tells you cannot find any Wi-Fi device. To fix that, I think you have to click the search Wi-Fi networks. And again, after several eternities, you'll get a list of available wireless hubs. And while it does remember passwords for wireless networks, it always shows them in plain text rather than encrypting them. So if you've got any security concerns about that one, you might want to not lend it to people you don't trust. But anyway, once you've done that and hit connect, it then takes a further 10-15 seconds to actually connect to the network. This isn't the speediest little device in the world. So once you're on the wireless network, you can then fire up the web browser, which is a little bit on the primitive side and also not the fastest thing in the world. But by default it goes to Google, so you can get onto the Google search and do whatever you need to there. Look at news, etc. if you want to. Unfortunately, I suspect with this thing only having 120 meg of RAM and 2 gig of storage, it probably doesn't cache anything, so it's never going to get much quicker than this. You also have access to the joys of Facebook, but I think this thing declares itself to be a mobile device, therefore you get the mobile version of it. So that works somewhat quicker than the BBC website at least, but it is a bit on the minimalist side. And then you've also got YouTube, which in theory works on here, but it uses a custom plugin to play the music videos, presumably because it's not got the processing power to handle the normal videos. So to actually watch a video on YouTube, you have to click on the video. And then to actually watch the video, you have to click on the play button at the top of the browser. So unfortunately I've not actually got this one working yet, so we'll skip over that one, but suffice to say that this is not really a good machine to try and be watching stuff on. Not set up email on this yet, but I think it's a fairly standard client. I think you just have to ignore the warning about encoding at the startup. And then the email client is apparently Slipheed, which I've never used before, but I'm assuming it's a Pigeon application, which again is a reasonably well known messaging application, so you can use that if you're familiar with it, and if not, hopefully it's not too difficult to sort out. Choose your messaging service, give your username and password, and Bob's your uncle. Then moving on to the Office applications, you have the usual bevy of open source tools. In this case it's Abbey Word that it uses. And having experimented earlier, the keyboard's not too bad. It's a little bit on the small side, but the keys are reasonably firm, it responds well, and there's no particular oddities about the arrangement of the keys. It's all a bit crammed together, but like I say, it's reasonable, and I've got quite big fingers. And now Abbey Word's finally finished loading. So this is a test of Abbey Word. Highly exciting stuff. And thankfully it does also come with a built-in dictionary. And the spreadsheet is numeric. I won't play with that one there, I assume people know what they do. Acrobat Reader, Dictionary, Calculator, and then you get to the slightly more interesting ones, which are the File Manager and Settings. So if we open up the File Manager, which hopefully will be a wee bit quicker, then by default it uses Windows style directory mappings. So you have the C:/local disk, and you can explore that to your heart's content. As previously mentioned, it does actually have an SD card and USB slot at the side. The manual is somewhat vague about what you can actually do with the USB slots. It says you can use it for USB storage. And I suspect you might be able to get a USB mouse to work, but I've not actually tried that. So, the SD card slot is slightly unusual. You've got to put the SD card in upside down. But it does click in quite nicely, and once it's in, it is pretty much flush the edge of the machine, unlike most of the netbooks you tend to get. Once it's inserted, it comes up as an SD disk, and you can then access it and do whatever you want to on it. So here's some of my own photos taken on my handy dandy little mobile phone. By default it uses GQ View for image viewing, but this opens up with a huge navigation tree on the left hand side and shows the images full size by default. So you've got to click on the Fit Image to Window button to actually see what the photo is. So there you go. But once it's actually loaded and doing stuff, it's reasonably quick and effective, and I think you can actually adjust the settings to force it to always shrink to fit. Settings widget, and it's fairly basic what you can do here. You can set up the language, which thankfully defaults to English, and you've even got a pound sign on the keyboard. You have the display setting, which I think you can just use to set the brightness. So I'll leave that as is for the moment. You have the network setting, which basically just shows you what IP addresses have been assigned to the network cards. And there's two of them because, as I said earlier, you've got the physical network port on the side And then you've got the wireless network card built in as well. And last but not least, you have the application manager, which is basically iPackage View. And according to this, I have nothing installed, which is nice. So you have the music player, and just to do a better job of testing it than using the provided media, we have an MP3 from magnitunes.com. Let's skip forward a bit. So music quality, or the speaker quality, isn't too bad. Slightly on the tinny side, but it's better than I'd expected for a device of this price. But it's also very much on the very basic side. As a music player, you don't get any ID-free information. Then I have the media player. And again, this thing has a 400 MHz processor and just 128 megs of RAM, and it does not have TV out or video out or VGA out or anything of that kind. So you just get to watch stuff on this screen. And you don't actually have a full screen-ish option. You still got the menu bar at the top. This is a DivX file. It's about 1 megabit a second data rate, and the picture quality is reasonable. So again, it's not going to replace your amazing Cowon or Arcos or whatever, but it's not doing too bad a job, surprisingly. You have a pair of games, Pengu Pop, which is a simple Bubble Bobble clone. And you also have the classic Nokia game Snake. That one's it's not quite as nice. You then have a voice recorder. The machine does have a built-in microphone, and you can plug in an external microphone. Although the internal one isn't great, since it doesn't actually seem to pick up very much at all. Here's one I prepared earlier with the speakers on full volume. And funnily enough, the display is completely static. Then have a basic painting application. Calling itself Paintbrusher, and it's basically pretty much identical to MS Paint. So you can create your masterpiece and then do whatever you want to it. And then the final application is the ebook reader, which is actually the more recognised open source tool called FB Reader, and that's a pretty powerful book reading device. It's actually capable of reading just about anything that isn't protected with DRM. And that's the whistle-stop tour of the applications on here. As far as I can see, despite the fact it's running Linux, there's no terminal prompt or way to easily get access to the underlying OS. But on the other hand, this is a whole £65, very small, very light, and very easy to carry around. So it's not going to be for everyone, because to be frank, the web browser isn't great, and the media capabilities are on the underpowered side, shall we say. But generally, for a little device to take around, do a bit of note taking and a bit of casual web surfing, it should do the job nicely.